Hey everyone, welcome to the Homeschool Success Podcast with Cami Wanis. And I am so excited because this is also our Live with Cami on Facebook group and YouTube Live today. And this is a really special event because we are joined by Ryan Swantstrom. Today, we're going to be talking about computer science. I mean, this is something we all know our kids need. And this is something that we kind of, as parents, we are, if we're not in the tech world already, we're like, okay, we know our kids need to learn some skills in computer science and stuff. And maybe we know, like, okay, they need to learn how to word process, they need to learn how to use the internet, they need to, like, maybe learn how to Excel spreadsheet or something. But how do we really know what they're going to need to prepare for the future and what are the resources to get there? And one of the things that really attracted me initially to Ryan was I saw his post in a Facebook group, another homeschooling Facebook group, and I was like, hey, he just literally was like, I'm here. I am a computer science guy. I have lots of information. Ask me any question you want. And I'm looking to do these courses and for students. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. And so literally he'll tell you the story, but he ended up getting a ton of responses, but I was the only one that was like, hey, let's work together, man. Like let's I want to know about this because I know there are not that many computer science courses out there for students. There's like things you can do for coding, programs you can use for that. My husband actually teaches Lego robotics and STEM in middle school, and so he gets to play with toys, which is super fun. But he also gets to do, like, he just gets to, play around with different resources and stuff, but it's really limited as far as, okay, he can use Scratch, they can use, code.org, and they can do some lessons on there and stuff, but it's not really geared with a sequential holistic program. And I feel like that's really missing for our kids, especially with what they're getting into in terms of the future, with, like we had on a previous podcast episode with AI when we were talking to Chris. And I am so excited because having a computer science program where you're actually learning those skills and what are the important skills to learn is really something we need to know. We need to start learning and playing with AI, of course, but what are the basic skills we need, and how do we get there? And like, what if our kids really are tech savvy and like they're way beyond us? Like, now I don't know what to give him because he already knows. He did all the coding.org. He, did all the the scratch stuff, and now I don't know where to send him. I don't know what to do. What does he do? Create his app, creates, all kinds of stuff. I don't know what to do. He wants to, like, one of our Facebook group members said, she said her son came to her and said, I want to create my own gaming console. And she's like, right on. I love that. And she has no idea what to do, where to send him, and who would, right? I mean, that's kind of an intimidating project. So I don't know if there's a YouTube video specifically just on, I mean, there probably is. We were just talking about that, but who knows? That's a bigger project than just like knowing how to code or something like that. I mean, her son probably just like didn't like the buttons in the right place. He thought they should be in a different order or something, I'm sure. But that's what we're here to talk about today. And I'm super excited because Ryan and I were talking a lot on the phone and in previous conversations about just this computer science stuff is really something that we're not really adept at teaching right now in terms of even high school or in middle school and in elementary school, and what resources we have is very limited. So for him to go out there and really create something is super cool, and I love his energy. He is a homeschooling dad. He's already in our community, which is awesome. He's got an amazing experience in terms of the just science and technology background in general, and I'll let him tell you about that. So, Ryan, can you just tell us a little bit about, first of all, your homeschooling experience, and then just briefly, and then just tell us about how you got in this tech industry and why you want to create stuff for kids?
All right. I will jump right into it. Like Cami said, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. Really happy to be here. I'm a homeschool dad. My oldest daughter, who we will tomorrow move her in for her sophomore year of college, we started homeschooling her halfway through kindergarten. And
Oh.
it was one of those things my wife said she just kind of had it on her heart that she wanted to do that. And so through the years, I have 5 children in total, and all of them have been homeschooled most of the time. There have been some that went to a class at a private school here or there, but largely they've all been homeschooled. And I think all of them are set to, the ones that are home, the remaining 4 will all be homeschooled this year. So that's kind of how I got into that. And I've had varying levels of involvement with homeschooling my kids over the years. I would say every year I've been involved in some aspect of it, some years more or less. But I have a tech background. I spent 20 some years in the tech industry being a software developer, a data scientist, a consultant, a number of those things. I did even spend a year being a computer science professor at a university a while back. For those that care, I do have a PhD in computational science and statistics. So I have, I guess, academic qualifications for that. But it's one of the things that's been on my mind for years that homeschool students need to be learning computer science, and not even really just homeschool. All students need to be learning computer science. And I noticed that in the homeschool world, there just wasn't a ton of options available. And that's why I decided this year, I was like, I really just need to go after this and start making some courses and making some content and talking to homeschoolers about what they need for preparing their children for a future in computers and a technology world. So that's kind of how it got us here. I'm going to pause for a second and let it go back to Cami in case you've got another question.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's really great. And I love that, that's what really homeschooling is all about is parents finding the best opportunities for our kids, and if we don't find them, we make them. That's just how it goes. I mean, that's really what homeschoolers are, scrappy like that, right? Homeschoolers are just,
Yes.
we make things happen, and that's just what it is. I love that. And this seems like kind of an obvious question, but just for kicks and giggles, like, why is computer science and learning these skills important for our kids' future success? I know we talked about, in a few previous episodes, we've talked about using AI and stuff like that, and how it's important for our kids to get familiar with that stuff so that we can put it in the good hands of the good kids, hands of the good future. But computer skills in general, let's just say, my kid is really interested in, art and doesn't like painting and doesn't really, want to do computers. Why do they need basic computer skills? Dumb question, but
So this is how I look at it. In most homeschool, in most high school curriculums, whether homeschooled or not, there are some basic elements that you always have to take to graduate. And oftentimes there's a series of science classes, that you need to take: a biology, a chemistry, a physical science. Sometimes it's a physics. There's just basic classes that you need to take. I have learned throughout my career that I work with many people, and I know many people who now work in the tech sector, work in computer programming or some area of tech, and they had zero background and zero formal training in computer science or anything like that. And I always ask myself, why isn't computer science a required part of our education growing up? Because just think about it. I don't have to convince people. We use computers all the time. And people that have jobs use computers, and we just use them all the time. Knowing how to create for those devices, I think, is a very valuable skill that all of us need to know. Much like knowing biology is important, even if you don't become someone in the medical profession, understanding a basic level of biology so that, you can know how to correctly apply first aid. When you go to the doctor and you break a bone and they explain things to you, you can kind of understand it a little bit. I think we need that same level of knowledge in the computer science world as well.
I love that you were talking about how you work with people who are in the tech industry who never had any formal training. And I think that's so funny because it's remarkable to me as a former high school teacher, and my husband's still teaching in public school, that it is not a required course by any stretch of the means. It's not even offered necessarily in a lot of places, and that's really shocking to me. And it kind of reminds me of when I was in high school and typing was offered, and it wasn't a requirement, but you could take typing. And I remember my parents being like, no, well, that's one of your electives, you're taking typing, that's just not an option, you're going to take typing because that's just what you need. But I feel like computer science is one of those things that should be required, but it's not, and it's not even offered in so many places, and that's such a shocking thing to me that it's not even being something that's an option for kids. It's really
That
crazy.
that is sure what I was going to stop here and jump in. And
Yeah.
there is a couple of things that like are contributing to this. One, when I started making classes a little while ago, I kind of thought maybe the homeschool world was a little bit behind enrolling computer science into their curriculum. But I've since concluded after talking to, public and private school students, it's not required there at all. A lot of schools don't even offer computer classes. And if they do, the students really aren't encouraged to take those computer science classes. Even if you're a student that knows you want to go on and, major in engineering or some field like that, you're not encouraged to take these classes in high school. And that really surprised me. But looking farther into this, and this one's kind of important for some people, if you really are preparing for your students for college, and I know everyone in the homeschool world isn't, everyone in the public schools isn't preparing their kids for college, but many colleges nowadays, and this one's important, many colleges nowadays will accept a year of computer science as a substitute for one of your other sciences. So if you apply to a college and they say we need 4 years of science, you can substitute one of those years as computer science. But I would say some schools do this, many schools do this, but not all schools. The thing that I'm discovering that's falling a little bit behind is scholarships. If you apply for certain scholarships and they're looking for 3 or 4 years of science, they may not accept computer science as one of those requirements for your scholarship. So even though you can get into a college, you may not be able to apply for a scholarship. And things like that are surprising me. And I think we're going to get there, but it just hasn't happened at blazing speed yet. And so we're just kind of waiting for that to catch up. But Cammie, I'm going to guess you and I both grew up and never took a computer science class in high school. I took them in college because I majored in computer science in college, but in high school, I didn't take one. So now as a homeschool parent, I'm asking myself what computer science should be in the high school. And that question right there is not well understood
I actually did take
by
a
anyone.
computer programming class in my senior year just as an elective, just because I was kind of interested in it. It was like the year when desktops were like just starting to get in everybody's homes, and I'm dating myself, you guys, seriously. And so it was on an Apple IIe, and it was a super basic programming class. It was in, yeah, it was in the language BASIC, actually.
I was going to guess it was probably in basic.
Yeah. And that's about where my computer science ended. But
Well,
it
so
was,
you're ahead of a lot of us. You actually had a computer science class in high school. So many of us didn't.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was really funny. I remember just writing the codes for them, and that with BASIC you have to write line by line by line by line, and then re-loop them and things. And I
Yeah.
remember just drawing like a square because you couldn't draw a circle. It wasn't possible in the Apple IIe. And so you had to draw a square, and it was like so hard. It took like 20 pages of code just to draw a square. It was amazing. Now the kids are like dragging and dropping code in, and
Some things have gotten easier, and some things, I don't know, can still be as challenging.
it is challenging in a different way. That's for sure. That is for sure. So, in talking about these kinds of skills and coding and things like that, what are the basic skills? Like, if I'm going to say my kid is at least computer savvy enough to be successful in their future, whatever they're choosing in or outside the tech industry, just a basic knowledge. What are those skills that they need?
All right. So I'm going to kind of take this one all the way back because I think parents are starting to notice this in the sixth, seventh, eighth grade, middle school years with their students. They're starting to notice an aptitude towards liking computers and spending a little bit more time on there. I will say, just because a child or a student likes to play on computers, it doesn't necessarily mean they are destined for a career in computer science. And this is similar to me. Like, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and television was a big thing. Just because I watched TV doesn't mean I was destined to be an actor. So just playing on a computer doesn't mean you're destined to be a computer worker when you grow up. But this is what I'd say: as a middle school student, get your child involved in some type of beginning programming class. And Scratch is one of the most popular languages out there, and it is highly targeted towards, younger people, beginners. It is very fun. It is block based. So, like Cami was saying, where you write line by line and then you loop everything back together. Scratch doesn't bring that in. So it's a little bit more accessible for newcomers in there. But some of the computer science basic topics, things like how do you create a loop? And for some of you, these terms I throw out maybe aren't even going to make sense. You've maybe never done these things. Loops, conditionals. How do you understand what an if statement means in a computer? What is a variable? What's a function? What's object-oriented programming? These are all things that you can learn if you continue taking computer science classes. But as a middle schooler, jumping into the Scratch programming language and getting to play around with a fun interface that's based on kind of making pretty simple games that you can play and share out for other people is a great way to start. Then when you get into high school, that's where I'm often telling people, get into a real programming class, not necessarily a Scratch one. Scratch is a great place to start, but when you get to high school, get into a real text-based programming. And there's lots of languages available. Python is a popular one. JavaScript is another one. C# is also another one. The class I teach is going to use C#. There's just a number of different languages to start with. And I would say it isn't necessarily so important which language you choose. It is important that you're learning the things I mentioned. Variables, looping, conditionals, functions, object-oriented programming. Those are things, and you can learn most of those things in a semester or a year-long class in computer science. But that's where it gets a little bit interesting, is once you've taken that class, then what do you do next? And so I don't know, Cami, if you want me to talk about that or if you had a follow-up question for this.
Yeah, go ahead. I definitely did want to mention, just in terms of the skills in general, some of you might be thinking, well, my kid's not really into, like, he's never going to code anything, or like, I don't know, he's not really like into tech that much. But those skills that you learned there, and Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, are like the actual, and the things you were talking about, looping, function, those kinds of things are such critical thinking, like strategic skills. Like, there's such thinking involved there in terms of problem solving and okay, this didn't work, because I know that's what my husband sees in Lego robotics a lot. Like, the kids come up and say, Mr. Juanes, this isn't working. I don't know why the programming, like, it's just stopping and we can't figure it out. What's going on? And he'll say, okay, well, why don't you see what's happening here? Let's look at the code for what that says. And they have to literally go back and problem solve. Is it my bot? Is it the Legos itself? Is it the coding? Is it the timing? Is it and all those kinds of things. Those are skills that even if you don't end up being in the tech world, which most of us won't end up being in the tech world, we are available to you at any time because you're actually using your problem solving skills. Is that what, like, really the basic part of those skills are?
Yes, computer science is very much logical thinking because computers do exactly what they're told, and when you tell them to do something wrong, they do it wrong. And in the computer world, we call those computer bugs. And like Tammy was mentioning, or Cami was mentioning, you need to be able to go back and step through each bit of logic. What am I doing here and what do I expect to happen? What am I doing here and what do I expect to happen? And you need to follow that logic all the way through, and it really works on your critical thinking problems.
And
Also, another
consequential
thing,
thinking.
yeah, yes, it is also really interesting as a computer scientist to know how to take a real world problem and turn it into something that a computer can solve. And that's at the heart of what computer scientists get to do, is turn those problems into solutions you can write on a computer. So it's very much problem solving and logical thinking.
I love that. Yeah, and really when we're talking about consequential thinking in terms of applying that in other places, we would say it also applies to then extrapolated down to, if I climb on this very thin branch, it might not hold me. Or if I don't do something that mom just told me to do, there are these consequences. Or if I make this bad decision, then there are these consequences. It's the same kind of thinking extrapolated out into the real world. And I love that you talk about the creativity part about it in inventing, because that's what kids do. They're always like, man, this is messed up. I don't like, just like Gina's son, I don't like where this button is on this console. I just need to make a new one. Like, I just need to make a total new one. That's all I need to do.
Yeah, and like just in computer science, you have a specific tool set, and often that tool set is a programming language and some frameworks and data storage that you have together. You can build lots of things, much like in the world, a general contractor or a carpenter can build just about any type of house, but you still have the same basic materials to work with. You've got some lumber and you've got some saws and some nails and some screws and some drills. And, you just have to know how to use the tools that you have to build what you want at the end.
That's a great example. Great example. And so, thinking about preparing our kids for this kind of, education, what kind of tech equipment do we need? Because I mean, does it have to cost us a lot? Because that's something that homeschoolers, we just aren't going to go spend $1 million on tech equipment if our kids aren't really going to be using it. And then we don't even know what to get. So, what are like some basic things that we need? And is it going to like really break the bank?
This is the interesting thing for computers and technology, that I don't know that other fields have this. A laptop is pretty much all you need to get started and build websites, build apps, build programs, all over. It doesn't even have to be a special laptop. And that's what's surprising. And that's why before the show, I was briefly mentioning that there are middle school kids that have access to a laptop, which is great. Like, I encourage it to do that, but they have access to a laptop and they have figured out the fact that I can code stuff and I can build stuff and I can make things on my laptop that, I don't know, 40, 50 years ago, people just couldn't do that. And if you think about in other career fields, if you want to be a, structural engineer, you maybe in the middle school years, you might build a small model of a bridge made out of balsa wood or something like that. But you're never going to go build a real bridge in, a city. But as an 8th grader with a laptop, you can build a real website that you can deploy out to the world, just like anybody else's website that's out there. And it's amazing the access we have to do these things on the internet. The barrier to entry is really pretty low. Most people have the tools to do this stuff.
Yeah, it's really remarkable. And I love that, even tech savvy kids, they want more of the tech stuff and everything, but you can really do a lot. It reminds me of that movie, the Die Hard movie, where he's like, he broke into NORAD with a laptop and you think I'm afraid of you? He's like, that's just like, you can do so much with a laptop.
Yes, you can. And one of the things I set up for my high school class on programming C# is you can do it on a Chromebook even, and you can get a lot of Chromebooks for under $300. I have a $250 Chromebook in my house that I will go sit upstairs on my lap or on my couch, and I can program things and run things on my Chromebook just through a web browser because there are some tools out there. It's amazing how low the barrier to entry to programming is.
I love that. And having good information too, right? So in just starting, if I'm just starting, where do I begin? I have a laptop, my kid's ready. Where do I go?
All right. So there's tons of resources on the internet for these. I have created ones and some learning resources specifically for the homeschool world. www.programmingprofessor.com gets you to those. I have an introductory Scratch course that is targeted at, I say, 10th graders and below. So the middle school, early high school years, teaches Scratch and a number of the basic, entry level computer science techniques you can use. I don't know that it'll run in the fall of 2023, but it probably will in the spring of 2024, a high school class covering the C# programming language. And that's a text-based language. It's a real language that real professional software engineers and developers use. So those are great resources if you're looking for some programming classes. I will also say that different people have different needs and different wants. There are lots of other resources on the internet. Some are paid, some are free. A lot of them are really good. I always say this a lot. I hope you take my classes. I mean, that's great, but I think I'm more interested in making sure that when kids graduate from high school, they at least have some knowledge of computer science in them. So I encourage people to, find that computer science class and, get your student enrolled in it. And if it happens to be my classes, that's great. But if not, get them in a computer science class somewhere.
So we've been talking a lot about high school and middle school kind of access, but what about for littles? Do you think it's important for elementary school aged kids to start playing around, or what age do you think that's appropriate? And what are some of the resources for them?
They do say that Scratch, the programming language I talked about, they have stuff for very early elementary age. I would say my children, right now I have a going to be second grader. I had to think about that for a second. Those kids, they just keep changing ages and they just keep getting older. So I got to try to get that right. But she's in second grade, and so far I've tried some of the things and some of the little apps on my phone. She really hasn't taken a big interest in it yet, and I think that's okay. I think it's fine. And I was working on a blog post about this and how do you integrate this? I think for most of your elementary grades, you don't necessarily need an entire year or semester of computer science and computer programming. I think it's something you can drop in a couple weeks of this and a couple weeks of that. And a great place to look for starters for younger ages is code.org. They're one of the big organizations that is very strong behind let's set some standards for computer science education and let's offer some resources to help people do this. And a lot of their stuff, if you search around on their site, you can find stuff targeted at kindergartners, targeted at first graders, at second graders, and they just have little lessons and lesson plans. And a lot of it you can do right in your computer browser. But it's a great way to introduce your elementary kids to computer science.
And it's free, right? Code.org is free, right?
Code.org is free. Yes.
So, and I know my husband uses that in middle school with his kids, and my son has used it before too. And it's really like a lot of games, right? It's kind of like coding games.
Yes. And one of the neat things that the computer science world has done over the last, maybe even only about 10 or 15 years, is they've started making computer programming more accessible to younger people to learn those logical thinking concepts. And how they've done that is they've built a lot of these apps and resources based around more fun, building some quick games, drag and drop, block based coding interface instead of having to write all your text, drag a block in there that's a for loop and things like that. It just makes it a little bit easier for uh, younger people to get started and doing this stuff.
Yeah, I think it's a really great way, and I know my son had fun with it, just playing around with it a little bit. He didn't really get too far into it, but it's interesting when he was in middle school that my he did the Lego Robotics County Challenge that my husband always takes a bunch of students to. And even though he hadn't been in the Lego Robotics class with my husband, and he doesn't really do a whole lot of, Lego robotics building with him. He kind of just lets him explore on his own. He actually really picked up Scratch super easy, and he was further along in than a lot of kids that were struggling with Scratch or just programming in my husband's class. I'm not trying to toot my kid's horn, but I'm just saying that it's a really easy program for kids to access, no matter whether they've been doing it for a long time or not.
It is. And one of the things I like about it is because of the logical thinking part of Scratch, you can kind of discover whether the problem solving in computer programming is something that your student enjoys. Because everybody's brain doesn't like to think that way. Everybody's brain doesn't want to do that. But some people do, and it's a great way to figure out early on, this is something I really like and I love solving problems this way, and my brain logically thinks this way. And I would love that every student gets exposed to that type of thinking before they graduate from high school, because I realize it's not going to be for everybody. Much like a lot of people take biology, most of us aren't going to grow up to be biologists, but we still get enough to understand what that is, so that when we see a problem that presents itself, we know whether it goes into the bucket of this is biology type of stuff. That's what I need to be thinking about. Whereas the computer science world is the same way. And I have a little story. One of my friends, I had lunch with a friend a couple of weeks ago. He works at a company. He said, just knowing what computer programming can do for you can save your company so much money. His example, he said, I worked at a company and they needed to send an email to a couple thousand of their employees. And what they did is they took one of the admin assistants at the office and they told her for the next 2 weeks, she had to handwrite all of these emails and put the person's name at the top and then put, I can't remember if it was the amount of money in their 401k account or something like that, respond and email them all this information. And my friend said, I told them they didn't have to do this. They could write a computer program to, go to our database and get everybody's name and their account balance and put this in an email, and they could send it to everybody. And we could probably code this up and send it off and be done in the afternoon, rather than having the admin assistant spend 2 weeks hand typing all these emails. But it goes back to if people don't know the types of problems you can solve with computer science, they can't apply them.
I love that. Yeah. There's so much I learn on a daily basis with everything that I'm doing with, videoing and podcasting and social media and all that. I'm like, my coach always tells me, oh, have you tried this website and they can do this? And I'm like, oh, that's amazing. I love that. Have you tried? Good job. Have you tried, whatever. It's like, that's really amazing. That will take a lot off the years of my life. Thank you. So that's definitely true. And so for kids, just starting out, I definitely know Scratch is a great way to go, like Ryan said. And then what about kids who are maybe older kids who are really into computers? Like I have a friend whose child is like way into building his own computers, like he builds towers and stuff like that. What about those kids? Where do they go from here? Like so they know how to do Scratch, they know how to do a little bit of AI stuff. Well, where do they go? What other class do they take? What's the next level?
All right, this is a topic and a question I've gotten a similar question a lot of times, and I'm going to spin this question a little bit. I get this a lot. Parents say, "Can my student get a job straight out of high school?" And here is my answer to that. It is yes, but probably no. And here's why I'd say that. There are tons of people in tech that don't have a degree, but they don't have a degree in computer science or sometimes even a degree in anything. Many of them worked somewhere else. Maybe they worked at a factory, maybe they worked at a warehouse, and over the 5-10 years they worked there, they became the person that always went and fixed the computer when it was broken. It really wasn't their job, but they fixed it. And then eventually the company needed some tech workers, and that person rolled into the job. And eventually, years later, they're a tech worker now, but they never really got formal training and a degree. So that's why a lot of people don't have tech degrees. But why I say is, don't prepare your high school student upon high school graduation to be ready for getting a tech job. And this is why I say that, because companies really aren't looking for and recruiting high school seniors to fill their job requisitions. And so there might be positions available for this, but it's kind of uncommon to do that. And so I've gotten a lot of questions about that. And talking to other people, the people I've run into that did get a job straight out of high school kind of fall into two buckets here. The first one is very, very bright student who, upon graduating from high school, can compete and be better than most college graduates, because you don't have to be as good, you have to be better than the college graduates, because any company is going to look at you and it's going to be hard to even get into the interview process, because they're going to say you don't even have a degree and you're straight out of high school. But if you can get into the interview, which I've heard is very hard, you have to overly impress them, because you're kind of coming from a deficit, and that means everything from your technical knowledge has to be amazing, plus your levels of responsibility and maturity and everything just has to be at a very, very high level, and it's hard to do that.
Or maybe just even with internships or some kind of apprenticeship programs might be a good way for kids to go into.
Yes. And the other type of high school students that get jobs right out of they're kids, the entrepreneurial type of students who, by the time they graduate from high school, they already have 10 people paying them to build them a website and to work on their stuff, and they realize they don't know to go to college. So what I'm starting to tell people is, if you have a student that is highly, highly interested in doing these things, many states offer the ability to do dual enrollment through local colleges or community colleges for their programs. And I know of some states where you can totally do an associate's degree your junior and senior year of college, and you graduate with an associate's degree in computer programming, and companies look for and recruit those types of people. Like they're looking for that. And so I'm kind of starting to tell people, don't bank on getting a tech job right out of high school. Maybe go the community college or associate's or bachelor's degree route, or when you get done with high school, see if you can find some internships, because sometimes places will hire you for that. Maybe get a job that is something that is maybe not hardcore tech, but kind of related, and things like a cell phone company place, a cell phone repair shop, a sales job at a big company that, you're helping sell computers, sell, TVs and tech products and things like that. Because then you're hanging out with tech, you're learning about it, you know more about it. And at the same time where you're doing that, start studying for some certifications, because the tech world, certifications can get you in the door. So there's a couple different ways, but I caution people to say it's kind of unrealistic to graduate from high school and just guarantee you're going to jump right into a computer programming job.
Well, they think they're going to play enough video games, they can be a video game creator, right? Or something, which they totally could be. But
I have tons of thoughts on that, but that's not what we're talking about here.
Definitely.
Actually,
Def
I'm just gonna stop you right there because
Yeah.
I do have a thought. I visited a college a couple weeks ago, and the head of the computer science department talked to me, and he said our gaming club on campus, because colleges have these now, gaming clubs, and they have esports team. He said our gaming club has the highest retention of any sport, club, major program in school history. And
Wow.
so for people that don't know, colleges do offer esports clubs and esports teams. So it is not unrealistic to, like, if your kid is really likes video games and you think they're pretty good at it, they can get college scholarships to do this.
Wow, that's incredible. I haven't seen that before. That's really amazing. And in terms of your resources in the future, we're kind of running out of time, so I want to make sure to let people know how they can reach you and where to get your resources in. So I know one of the questions that people are going to ask is what is your, as far as homeschooling computer science programs, that's what you generally focus on, but do this they have to be homeschoolers to take your classes?
You know, I say for my computer science one and like my classes, I say yes, although I do not have necessarily a way to verify and check that everyone is a homeschool student. So it's possible somebody could get in there and not be a homeschooler, but I'm targeting it at homeschool students.
Yeah, well, they would be doing it at home. Right? They'd have to do
Well,
it at home.
I guess that's true. I don't know. I haven't crossed the barrier yet where a public school student has asked to be in my class, or maybe they have. They just haven't come out and told me that they were that way. And I guess if that's okay, that's fine. It's just there are some different things that you associate with traditional school and homeschool, and I don't know. So I'm
Yes, I
choosing to go
agree.
homeschool.
Yeah, definitely. So how do we reach you? How does everybody kind of get a hold of you? What's what's the best place to, get your resources?
www.programmingprofessor.com is a website. The list of courses are on there if you want to check those out. One other thing that just started up that I wanted to call out and mention, I did just start a Minecraft club. It's not necessarily a computer science topic, but I thought it kind of falls close enough to what I talk about. I don't know who else is going to do this for the homeschool world, so I started a homeschool Minecraft club. If you join the club, you can get access to the official homeschool Minecraft server, and you can play Minecraft with other kids. There is also the Scratch course, and next spring there will probably be the computer science C# programming class, and there might be other courses in the future too as well. I may do some other things, but www.programmingprofessor.com is where you can find out the information. Sign up there for newsletter as well.
I love that. And so you guys make sure you look out for upcoming courses. I know I'm looking forward to having my son do the high school course, and he is always looking at what I'm doing and interviewing people, and he goes, "I want to do that. I want to do that." So he's looking forward to it already as well because I already told him about it. And I want to make sure that everybody gets in touch with you and keeps track of what you're doing, because I know that you're serving our homeschooling community in a very big way, and you but for sure are the best person to know about what they need in that area. So thank you again for joining us. I'm super excited. This is going to be a wonderful journey together. I know we're going to keep in tabs on each other, and definitely you know share resources, and I'm super excited about that. So, and I'm really excited about what we talked about today because it's something that I feel like I learned some things and I didn't really think about before, especially when we were talking about how the thinking skills of computer science transfer to other places. So, it's really interesting, and I feel like this is a really great conversation. So, thank you so much. Is there one thing that you would like say, just lasting comments, lasting tip to give to a homeschooling parent?
Well, first I'd say thanks for having me on, Cami. And the next thing I would say, homeschooling, it isn't easy. So you got this.
Hey, that's my line too. I always say that as well. I love that. You guys do got this. I say that all the time. This is a leap of faith. It is the best journey you'll ever be on. And it is something that you were born to do. You are your kid's number one and most important teacher, like I always say. And this is something that you have got. I love it. I love it. All right. Thanks for joining us today and look forward to seeing you all on the next episode. Bye bye.